Give me your hand." Before she could answer, he twisted the ring off her finger and slid it across the glass counter. "Resize it for her." The jeweler froze. The customers stopped talking. The younger woman smiled. Joy didn't react. She just sat there, calm. Across the store, a woman lifted her phone and started recording. But what he didn't realize was that she wasn't a stranger at all. And if you think you know where this story is going, stay. Because what Joy did next is something nobody in that store and nobody watching this will see coming. Coleman's Fine Jewelers, Tuesday afternoon. 4 customers inside. Quiet enough to hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and the soft scrape of Mr. Coleman's polishing cloth against a tray of gold chains behind the main counter. That was the room Terrence walked into. Tall, clean-shaven, charcoal suit that still smelled like dry cleaning. He moved through the door the way he moved through every room, like he owned it before he entered it. One hand pressed against the small of Joy's back, guiding her toward the counter like she was luggage he was wheeling through an airport terminal. Joy walked beside him in a cream blouse and gold earrings, her posture straight, her face soft and open and trusting. She thought they were here to get her ring cleaned. That's what he told her that morning over coffee, casual as weather talk. "Let's stop by Coleman's on the way home. Get that ring looking right." She believed him. Why wouldn't she? She had believed him about the late meetings. She had believed him about the business trips. She had believed him about the cologne. Believing Terrence was something Joy had done so long it had become muscle memory, the kind of reflex your body performs before your brain has time to question it. But the moment they stepped through the door, another woman appeared from the bracelet aisle. Younger, taller, red dress that clung in places a Tuesday afternoon jewelry store had no business seeing. Her heels clicked once on the tile floor and stopped. She didn't look at Joy, didn't acknowledge her existence. She walked straight to Terrence and stood beside him at the counter like she had been standing there for months, like she belonged. Vanessa. Terrence reached for Joy's left hand without a word. He gripped her wrist, twisted the sapphire anniversary ring past her knuckle with a quick, practiced motion, and placed it flat on the glass counter. The stone caught the overhead light and threw a small blue shadow across the surface. Inside the band, in letters so small you'd have to hold it inches from your eye to read them, were 2 words engraved in thin gold script. "My only." He slid the ring toward Mr. Coleman and tapped the glass with 2 fingers. "Resize this to a 6. Mr. Coleman's polishing cloth went still in his hand. He looked at Joy, then at Vanessa, then back at Terrence. His mouth opened slightly, closed, opened again. "Sir, just do it." Terrence didn't blink. "She needs it fitted smaller." Every conversation in the store died at once. The couple near the window turned around. The 2 women by the watch display stopped pretending to browse. The air itself seemed to pull tight, like fabric stretched between 2 hands. Then Vanessa tilted her head and looked at Joy, the way someone looks at a piece of furniture being carried out of a house they've already redecorated in their mind. "That's a beautiful ring," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with something that wore the mask of politeness. "It deserves to be on someone who actually appreciates it." She held Joy's gaze for a full 3 seconds. Then she turned to the mirror on the counter and began trying on a pair of diamond earrings, holding one up to her lobe, tilting her jaw like she was posing for a photograph only she could see. Joy's fingers rested flat on the counter. Her breathing didn't change. Her eyes didn't water. She didn't look at Vanessa. She didn't flinch. She stood the way a statue stands in a storm. still, unmoved, watching. Terence leaned into the counter and let out a short laugh, the kind meant to be heard by every ear in the room. She never appreciated anything I gave her. 10 years, and she couldn't keep herself interesting enough to deserve what was right in front of her. Boring. That's all she ever was. Just boring. He shook his head. Wasted on her. The words dropped into the store like stones into still water. One of the women near the watches covered her mouth with both hands. The young man by the window put his arm around his fiancée and pulled her closer. Mr. Coleman's jaw locked tight, the muscles along his neck pulling taut. He was a businessman, and this was a customer, but even he couldn't keep the disgust from his eyes. Vanessa reached over and touched Terence's arm, a slow, deliberate touch, her fingers trailing from his elbow to his wrist in full view of everyone. She looked at Joy while she did it. That was the part that made it cruel. The looking, the making sure Joy could see it. And in the far corner of the store, half hidden behind a rotating rack of pearl necklaces, an older woman in a navy blazer and reading glasses stood very still. She had been browsing for 10 minutes, picking up pendants and turning them over and setting them back down. But she wasn't browsing anymore. Her phone was raised, just slightly, the screen bright in the dim aisle, angled directly at the counter. Mrs. Elaine Patterson, church elder, president of the women's ministry at Greater Mount Zion Baptist, a woman who had known Joy since she was 9 years old. A woman who had sat beside Joy's mother in the same church pew for 20 years. Their eyes met across the store. 2 seconds. No nod, no wave, no signal anyone else could read. Just recognition. Deep and private and loaded with everything that was about to come. Everyone in that store thought Joy was broken. She wasn't. She was counting. 13 years earlier, Terence asked Joy out 4 times before she said yes. He took her to a park bench by the river with 2 cups of coffee and a bag of donuts from a corner bakery that didn't bother putting its name on the bag. He talked for 3 hours, told her about his mother Gloria, his fear of being ordinary, the insurance consulting firm he was going to build from nothing. Joy listened to all of it without interrupting. She held her coffee and watched the river and let him be exactly who he was. Somewhere between the second cup and the sunset, he decided she was the one. He told Gloria that night. Gloria said, "She's quiet," and left it at that. They married 2 years later, 60 guests. Gloria in the front row wearing a lavender hat, crying tears that could have meant anything. The early years were honest, not perfect, but honest in the way that matters, the way where 2 people can sit in the same room without talking and still feel like they're together. Terence built his firm from a folding table in their spare bedroom, working 18-hour days, coming home smelling like printer ink and coffee that had gone cold 3 hours ago. Joy worked as a school counselor, spending her afternoons with children who came into her office with problems too big for their backpacks and nowhere else to put them. She'd come home tired but warm. He'd come home wired and distant. But they met in the kitchen every night, standing over the stove or the sink, talking about nothing and everything until the house felt full. They bought a townhouse on a tree-lined street where the mailman knew everyone's name. Planted tomatoes in the back garden that never grew right no matter what they tried. Different soil, different stakes, different amounts of water. They laughed about it every summer, standing over the same crooked patch of dirt like it was a running joke only the 2 of them were allowed to hear. Those tomatoes never did grow, but the marriage did. Or at least, Joy thought it did. For their 5th anniversary, Terence designed a ring. He went to Coleman's Fine Jewelers by himself, sat with Mr. Coleman behind that same counter for 2 hours, looking at stones and bands and settings until his eyes blurred. He picked a sapphire because Joy once told him, on a random Tuesday while they were doing laundry, that sapphires reminded her of her grandmother's brooch. He remembered. He had it engraved inside with 2 words in thin gold script, "My only." When he slipped it on her finger at dinner that night, his hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. Joy wore it every day after that. She never took it off. Not to wash dishes, not to garden, not to sleep. For 10 years, that ring didn't leave her hand. It became part of her skin, part of how she moved through the world. The shift crept in like mold growing behind a wall you can't see. First the phone, always face down now, always locked. Then the late meetings that didn't appear on his calendar. Then the cologne, something sharp and unfamiliar that clung to his collar when he came home past midnight, his eyes avoiding hers as he loosened his tie. Joy noticed. She always noticed. But she didn't say anything. It was Gloria who turned the crack into a canyon. Sunday dinners at her house became something different. What used to be warm, loud, full of laughter, and too much food became something careful and cold. Gloria started dropping comments that landed sideways, sharp enough to draw blood, but wrapped in enough sweetness that you couldn't call it what it was without looking like the problem yourself. "Joy, honey, you're so quiet at these dinners. Terrence needs a woman with energy, with fire. You can't just sit there looking pretty and expect that to be enough. Some women just aren't built to keep up with a man like my son. There's no shame in that, sweetheart. It's just nature." She said it in front of cousins, in front of neighbors, in front of the same guests who had been at the wedding, who had watched Joy walk down the aisle, who had clapped when Terrence kissed her. Gloria said it with a plate of food in one hand, and a smile on her face, and a touch on Joy's shoulder that pressed down more than it ever held up. And Terrence sat at the table and ate and let every word land where it landed, like a man who agreed with the sermon but wanted the preacher to do the talking. Then came the barbecue, a Saturday in July, Gloria's backyard. The air was thick with charcoal smoke and humidity, the grill hissing every time fat hit the coals. Cousins and neighbors and church friends filled the yard, paper plates bending under potato salad and cornbread. Children ran between the tables. Music played from a speaker someone had balanced on the porch railing. Joy was carrying a tray of lemonade through the patio door when she saw Gloria standing near the back gate with a younger woman she had never seen before. They were leaning in close, exchanging phone numbers, their heads almost touching, laughing about something they didn't want anyone else to hear. Gloria saw Joy watching and waved her off with a flick of her wrist, the kind of gesture you use to shoo a fly from a plate. "That's Vanessa. She's from my book club." Joy smiled politely, set the lemonade down on the picnic table, said nothing. She didn't need to ask questions. Something about the way Gloria's voice dropped half a note when she said the name. Something about the way the younger woman glanced toward the grill where Terrence was standing, and then looked away too quickly, told Joy everything she needed to feel. She filed the name in the same quiet place where she kept every unanswered question, every midnight arrival, every cologne that wasn't hers. That place was getting full. But Joy was patient. Patience was the only weapon nobody ever thought to take from her. 3 months before the jewelry store, a Thursday evening in late autumn, rain tapping against the kitchen window, the smell of garlic and thyme rising from the stove. Terrence left his iPad on the counter, walked out to his car for something, gone less than 5 minutes. The screen was still logged in, still warm. Joy was reaching past it for the salt shaker. Her wrist grazed the screen, and it woke up. The messages were right there, open, unguarded, like she wasn't worth the effort of hiding from. She looked. Months of conversations between Terrence and Vanessa. Not just dinner plans and hotel arrangements, conversations about Joy. Long, casual, merciless conversations where they picked her apart like an old appliance they were about to replace. Vanessa. She's just the placeholder, babe. You know that. She keeps the house warm until you're ready to move on. Terrence. 3 laughing emojis. 1 word. Facts. Joy's knuckles went white around the counter's edge. The steam from the pot drifted across the kitchen like something trying to escape the room. She didn't scroll fast. She scrolled carefully, methodically. Every word, every timestamp, every casual cruelty treated with the precision of a woman reading a contract she was about to tear apart. Then she found the group chat. 3 names: Terrence, Vanessa, Gloria. Gloria had written, time-stamped at 11:43 at night. Just give the girl the ring. Joy doesn't deserve it anyway. She was never enough for my son. Let Vanessa have it. A fresh start. The first time Joy read it, her chest tightened so hard she pressed both hands flat on the counter and bent forward slightly, her breathing going thin. Not tears. Pressure. The pressure of discovering that the person who was supposed to protect your marriage was the one handing out the matches and pointing at the kindling. The second time she read it, something behind her eyes shifted. Not rage, something colder, something patient, something that had teeth but didn't need to bite. Not yet. She scrolled further. Gloria had been coaching Terrence for months, like a handler running a long operation. What to say when Joy asked questions, how to explain the late nights, which credit card to use so the statements wouldn't overlap, when to bring Vanessa around and when to keep her invisible. This wasn't a mother looking the other way. This was architecture, planned, deliberate, built beam by beam to demolish Joy's marriage from the inside, while smiling at her across the dinner table. Joy took screenshots, every message, every name, every date. She backed them up to a cloud folder Terrence didn't know existed, put the iPad back exactly where it was, wiped the salt shaker, turned back to the stove. When Terrence came home, she served him baked chicken and rice with a glass of sweet tea. He kissed her forehead. "You're too good to me, Joy." She smiled. That night, after he fell asleep, his breathing heavy, and even in the dark bedroom, Joy slid out of bed without making a sound. She walked barefoot through the kitchen where the dishes were still drying on the rack, into the living room. She sat down in the chair by the window, the one she used to read in on Sunday mornings, and pulled out her phone. One call. Her voice, barely above a whisper. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." A long pause. She pressed her free hand flat against her thigh to keep it from trembling. Then, quieter. "How long have you known?" 11 minutes. The call lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, she set her phone face down on the side table and stared at the ceiling for a very long time. Outside, a car passed on the street, its headlights sweeping across the ceiling in a slow arc and then disappearing. The house was silent. Terrence was still asleep upstairs, dreaming whatever it is that men dream when they think they've gotten away with everything. Joy's face gave nothing away, but the decision that had been forming quietly behind her silence for weeks was now made. Completely, irreversibly, made. Joy moved like water after that, quiet, deliberate, invisible to anyone not watching closely. Thursday morning, a divorce attorney named Sandra Blake, sixth floor of a building downtown that smelled like leather chairs and fresh paper. Sandra had silver earrings and a reputation for protecting women who walked through her door, holding evidence in one hand and their composure in the other. Joy brought everything. Screenshots, financial records she'd pulled together over 2 weeks, a handwritten list of every asset in his name, her name, and both. Sandra looked at the folder, then looked at Joy over the top of her glasses. "You've been thinking about this for a while." "I've been ready for a while. I was just waiting for proof." The financials showed Terrence had been funneling money into a separate account for over a year. Gifts for Vanessa, hotel stays on weeknights, a weekend trip to Savannah that Joy had been told was a business conference, all time-stamped, all traceable, all undeniable. Joy didn't cry. She asked questions, took notes in a small blue notebook she kept in her purse, shook Sandra's hand at the door, and walked into the afternoon sun like a woman leaving a surgeon who'd just told her the operation was going to work. She got into her car, sat behind the wheel for a full minute without starting the engine, and breathed. Just breathed. Then she turned the key and drove home, stopping at the grocery store on the way to buy the ingredients for Terrence's favorite dinner. Because that was the part nobody teaches you about survival. You don't stop cooking. You don't stop smiling. You don't tip your hand until every card is where it needs to be. 2 days later, a small cafe off Moorhead Street, mismatched wooden chairs, good sweet potato pie, jazz playing through a speaker nobody could find. Mrs. Patterson was already seated when Joy walked in, her hands folded, her reading glasses resting on the table. "I saw what he did in that store, baby. I recorded every word, every look on that girl's face." She leaned forward. "You just tell me when." "Not yet," Joy said, "but soon." Mrs. Patterson had seen Terrence and Vanessa together twice before the jewelry store, once at a restaurant downtown, his hand on her knee in a corner booth. Once leaving a hotel on South Boulevard in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon, walking to separate cars like people who had practiced the exit. She hadn't said anything before because she didn't want to cause pain without certainty. After the store, certainty wasn't the question anymore. "That boy took your ring off like it meant nothing," Mrs. Patterson said, shaking her head, "and that girl stood there smiling like she won something, standing there like she already owned your life." Joy stirred her tea. "She didn't win anything." "No," Mrs. Patterson said, covering Joy's hand with her own. "She didn't, and she never will." The next 2 weeks, Terrence got reckless. Not careless the way people get when they're tired. Reckless the way people get when they think they've already won. He stopped hiding the phone calls entirely. Took them in the next room with the door half open, laughing too loud, Vanessa's name rolling off his tongue like a test he was daring Joy to fail. He took Vanessa to the Italian restaurant on Park Road, the one with the red candles and the bread basket Joy used to love, the one where he proposed the idea of their first anniversary trip to Savannah over a bottle of Chianti. He sat in the same booth, ordered the same meal, and posted a photo of it online. Joy saw it scroll across her feed at 9:30 at night while she was sitting on the couch in her robe. She looked at the photo for 3 seconds, double-tapped it with her thumb, set the phone down, went back to folding laundry. She folded every piece carefully, corners matched, sleeves tucked. The steadiness of her hands would have terrified Terrence if he had been paying attention. But he wasn't. He hadn't paid attention in a very long time. Gloria called one evening, voice soaked in false tenderness. "Sweetheart, I've been thinking. Maybe you should just let him be happy. Some women aren't built to keep a man like Terrence. There's no shame in stepping aside gracefully. Joy held the phone away from her ear. Let Gloria breathe into the silence, waiting for the tears, waiting for the begging. Then brought it back. Thank you for calling, Gloria. Click. That same week, a cream-colored invitation arrived, gold lettering. The church's annual appreciation dinner. 200 guests. Terrence Bradley, Man of the Year. Joy, RSVP'd yes. Then she called Pastor Williams' office. I'd love to say a few words about my husband. After everything he's done for this community, I think it's only right. The secretary was delighted. We'll put you right after his award, Mrs. Bradley. Joy hung up and sat alone in her kitchen for a long time, fingers resting on the counter where the iPad had been. The sapphire ring was gone from her hand. Terrence had taken it, but she could still feel the weight of it, not on her finger, somewhere deeper, somewhere that didn't bruise on the surface. The week before the dinner, Terrence started watching Joy differently. She was sleeping through the night, eating well. She'd stopped asking where he went, stopped checking his phone. She bought a new dress, deep navy blue, and hung it on the closet door like a declaration he couldn't decode. "What's got into you?" he asked from the doorframe one evening, arms crossed, watching her steam the dress. The steam rose between them in thin white ribbons that vanished before they reached the ceiling. Joy turned, face open, calm, clear. "Nothing's got into me, Terrence. I'm just at peace." He stared at her. His jaw worked slightly, chewing on a thought he didn't want to swallow. Then he shook his head and walked down the hallway, his footsteps slowing near the stairs, like a man who kept expecting to hear something behind him, but never did. At church rehearsal, Gloria spotted Joy talking quietly with Mrs. Patterson and two other elders near the kitchen. She tried to drift closer, pretending to check the napkin folds. Joy looked up. "Gloria, don't you have somewhere to be?" The words weren't sharp. They didn't need to be. Gloria's lips flattened. She turned and called Terrence that night, voice tight. "Something's off with Joy. She's too calm. She's been spending time with Elaine Patterson. You need to be careful." Terrence laughed, short, dismissive. "Careful of what? She's always calm. That's her whole problem. No fire, no backbone. She'll sit at that dinner and smile and clap like she always does." Vanessa texted him that same night. "I want to come to the dinner. I want to see you get that award." He hesitated, thumb hovering over the keyboard for 3 seconds. Something thin moved through his chest. Not guilt, something closer to the edge of doubt. But it passed. It always passed. "Yeah, come." Greater Mount Zion Baptist Church. Fellowship Hall dressed for royalty. White tablecloths stretched across every table. Tea-light candles flickered inside glass holders, throwing small, dancing shadows against the walls. A banner behind the podium read, "Honoring those who serve," in gold serif letters against a deep blue background. 200 guests in their finest suits and dresses filled the room, their voices layered over one another in the particular hum that only happens when a church community gathers to celebrate one of its own. The room smelled like gardenias from the centerpieces, fried chicken from the kitchen, and the warm self-satisfaction of a congregation that believed, with every fiber of its collective heart, that it was celebrating something good and true and earned. Terrence sat at the head table like a man who had been sitting at head tables his whole life. Black suit, silver tie, jaw squared, shoulders back. The posture of someone who had already written his acceptance speech in his head 3 times and was just waiting for the microphone. Gloria sat beside him in burgundy, her hand resting on his forearm like she was presenting her finest creation to the world. her smile wide and practiced and shining with the kind of pride that comes from believing you built the man everyone is applauding. 3 rows back, near the center aisle, Vanessa sat in a fitted emerald dress, legs crossed, clutch resting on her thigh, scanning the room with the quiet satisfaction of a woman watching the opening act of what she believed was her own love story. Joy was in the 2nd row, navy dress, simple gold necklace, hands folded in her lap. She looked at the podium the way someone looks at a stage before a performance they have spent months memorizing. Her breathing was even, her posture was straight. She didn't look around the room, she didn't need to. She already knew where everyone was sitting. Prayer, dinner, a video tribute, clips of Terrence at volunteer events, handing out coats, reading to children, shaking hands with local leaders. The room clapped. Women dabbed their eyes. Gloria nodded along like she'd directed the footage. Pastor Williams took the podium. This man has shown what it means to serve. We are proud to name Terrence Bradley our Man of the Year. Terrence stood, buttoned his jacket, walked to the podium slowly, letting the applause settle around him. He accepted the plaque with both hands and looked out at the room with the easy confidence of a man who had never been questioned in a space like this. He gave a speech about values, about integrity, about being a man who stands by what matters. He used the word commitment. He used the word honor. He talked about what it meant to be a man of your word in a world that didn't always reward honesty. He thanked his mother for raising him right. He thanked his wife for standing by his side through everything. He said Joy's name the way you say the name of someone you've already forgotten. A word that fills space but carries nothing. The room applauded. Joy's hands stayed in her lap. Then Pastor Williams leaned into the microphone. And now, Terrence's wife Joy would like to say a few words. Terrence blinked. His head turned toward Joy, and his smile froze at the edges. He hadn't known. Nobody told him. Joy stood slowly, smoothed her dress with both hands, walked to the podium the way she did everything. Calm, measured, without hurry. She adjusted the microphone down 1/2 inch. She looked out at 200 faces. She smiled. Thank you, Pastor Williams. Thank you all for being here tonight. She let the silence settle, let it fill the room like water rising in a glass. My husband just spoke about standing by what matters, about integrity, about commitment. She looked directly at Terrence. His hand was already gripping the armrest. I'd like to talk about what those words actually look like, behind closed doors. She reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. Terrence's smile collapsed like a building losing its foundation. 3 months ago, I found messages on my husband's device, some messages between him, a woman named Vanessa, and his own mother, Gloria. The room shifted. Not a gasp, something deeper. Like the floor itself adjusted under 200 chairs. Every spine straightened. Every eye locked on Joy. In those messages, Vanessa called me the placeholder. My husband responded with laughing emojis and the word facts. A murmur broke across the hall like a wave hitting stone. Terrence's knuckles went white on the armrest. The color was leaving his face in real time, draining downward like water through sand. Pastor Williams took a half-step back from the podium, his hand finding the edge of the lectern. He didn't intervene. He couldn't. The room wouldn't have let him. In another message, my mother-in-law, Gloria, wrote this. Joy looked down at her phone. She read slowly, clearly, without inflection. The way someone reads a verdict they already know by heart. Just give the girl the ring. Joy doesn't deserve it anyway. She was never enough for my son. Gloria's face went gray. Not white. Gray. The color of something that's been dead longer than anyone knew. Her fingers dug into the tablecloth hard enough to pull it sideways, rattling a glass that nobody reached for. Behind her, someone whispered, "Oh my God." 2 tables over, a deacon's wife pressed both hands flat over her mouth. The room wasn't just listening anymore. The room was witnessing. And there is a difference between those two things that every person in that fellowship hall understood in their bones. Joy reached into her clutch one more time. She pulled out a small velvet pouch, opened it carefully, placed the sapphire ring upright on the podium, turning it so the inner band faced the room. The engraving caught the overhead light. My only. He had this ring made for me 10 years ago. He designed it himself. He engraved those words because he said I was the only woman he would ever need. She paused. Let the words land. Last month, he pulled this ring off my finger inside a jewelry store and asked the jeweler to resize it for the woman sitting in row 3. Every head in the fellowship hall turned at once. 200 pairs of eyes found Vanessa. Her smile was gone. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her fingers tightened around her clutch until the knuckles threatened to break through the skin. She started to rise. The woman beside her gripped her arm and whispered hard and low, "Sit down." Mrs. Elaine Patterson rose from the back of the room. Her voice carried clear as a church bell across 200 silent faces. I was in that store. I saw everything he did, and I recorded every word. The room went past, gasping. It went still. The kind of stillness that has weight, that presses against walls and holds every person in place, unable to move, unable to look away, unable to pretend they hadn't heard what they just heard. Terrence stood. His chair scraped the floor. His mouth opened. He looked at Joy, then the room, then Gloria, then back at Joy. Gloria had one hand over her mouth, the other gripping the table's edge. Vanessa was staring at the floor, shoulders pulled in. The emerald dress that looked confident 20 minutes ago, now looking like something she wanted to disappear inside. Terrence's lips moved. Nothing came out. 2 years of talking about Joy behind her back, and now, standing in front of every person who mattered in his life, he had absolutely nothing to say. Joy looked at him one final time, not with anger, not with tears, with the quiet, settled calm of a woman who had already done her grieving in private, behind closed doors, in the dark, alone, and had come through it, whole. "I'm not angry, Terrence. I'm done." She stepped away from the podium. She walked down the center aisle. She did not look back. The room stayed silent for 6 full seconds. Then the murmuring began, low and spreading, like a fire finding air. The days after moved fast and landed heavy. The church board held a quiet meeting Tuesday. By Wednesday, Terrence's name was removed from the community donor wall. The plaque came back in a manila envelope. No note. Gloria's world caved in slower, but the damage ran deeper than anything she had prepared herself for. The women's ministry held a private meeting on Thursday and asked her to step down from leadership. Not a vote, a request. The kind that comes with folded hands and lowered eyes, and the understanding that refusing would only make things worse. By the following week, 3 women she had mentored for years stopped returning her calls. Text messages were opened, read, and never replied to. The invitations to brunches and prayer groups and birthday dinners dried up one by one until her phone went silent for entire days. 3 decades of carefully constructed social influence, of committee chairs and Sunday morning introductions, and knowing everyone's name and their business before they knew it themselves. All of it dissolved in under 2 weeks. Gloria told herself it wasn't fair. She told herself Joy had overreacted, that what happened in a family should stay in a family. But the silence that surrounded her now wasn't interested in her opinion. The silence just kept growing. Vanessa waited 6 days for Terrence to call. He didn't. She texted, "So, what now?" He read it, didn't respond. She sat in her apartment that evening with the lights off, still wearing the gold bracelet he bought her last month. She turned it slowly around her wrist, watching it catch the faint glow from the streetlight outside her window. The apartment felt smaller than it used to, quieter, like a room that had been set up for a celebration that never happened. She hadn't been in love with Terrence. She understood that now, sitting in the dark with her knees pulled to her chest and mascara she hadn't bothered to wipe dried-in streaks down her cheeks. She'd loved the dinners at places she couldn't afford on her own. The gifts that arrived without occasion, wrapped in tissue paper like thoughtfulness could be purchased by the yard. The intoxicating, addictive feeling of being chosen over someone else, of being the one a man left his wife for, of being wanted so desperately that he'd rip a ring off another woman's finger and hand it to you in front of strangers. That was the drug, not Terrence, the choosing. But now there was nobody left to be chosen over. The marriage was ending, and he wasn't calling, and the bracelet on her wrist felt like exactly what it always was. Costume jewelry from a man who costumed everything. Terrence's lawyer reviewed Joy's evidence, screenshots, financial records, the video from the store. He leaned back and exhaled through his nose. "My honest advice, settle, quietly, before it gets worse." Terrence stared at the stack of papers on the desk and felt, for the first time, the actual shape of what he had done. Not the affair, not the lies, the shape of the life he had dismantled, the shape of the woman he had underestimated for so long that he forgot she was the foundation he was standing on. He signed the settlement papers 3 weeks later in the same office, his hand steady but his eyes hollow, the eyes of a man who had finally stopped performing and had nothing left underneath. 2 weeks after the dinner, he drove past the house. The locks had been changed. Joy's car in the driveway, freshly washed. A new welcome mat on the porch. Burgundy with a sunflower stitched into the center. The garden beside the front steps had been replanted. New flowers. Things that were actually growing. Something about that welcome mat, something small and chosen and deliberate, hit him harder than everything that happened in the fellowship hall. Harder than the silence. Harder than the turning heads. Because the mat said what no words needed to say. She was already building something new. Something that didn't include him. Something that didn't need him. She hadn't just moved on. She had moved forward. And she hadn't looked back once. He sat in his car for 11 minutes, engine running, hands on the wheel, watching the house he used to live in glow, warm through the curtains. Then he shifted into drive and pulled away slowly, the way a man drives when he knows he's leaving something he can never come back to. Gloria called Joy one final time on a Sunday afternoon. Her voice was different now. Stripped bare of the sweetness that used to wrap everything she said like ribbon on a gift nobody asked for. No warmth, no performance. Just the raw, defensive tone of a woman who had lost her audience and still couldn't understand why the show had been canceled. "You didn't have to do that in front of everyone, Joy. You could have handled it privately. You could have come to me." Joy was rinsing a coffee mug at the kitchen sink. She set it down on the drying rack carefully, dried her hands on a towel, held the phone with both hands, not because she needed the support, but because she wanted to feel every second of what she was about to say. You didn't have to help him destroy our marriage behind my back, Gloria. You didn't have to coach him through every lie. You didn't have to hand my ring to another woman like it was a party favor, but you did. So I handled it the way I needed to, and I'd do it again. She hung up. The kitchen was quiet. The faucet dripped once, twice, then stopped. And that was the last time Gloria and Joy ever spoke, 6 months later. A small apartment Joy chose herself. 3rd floor, east-facing. Morning sun warm on the iron railing and the small round table beside her chair. Coffee, still steaming. A paperback cracked open face down on the table. Rosemary growing in a clay pot by the window. A silence that didn't ache anymore. The apartment wasn't fancy. It didn't need to be. Every towel, every plate, every decision about what went where was hers, all hers. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson. "Proud of you, baby. Always was." Joy smiled. A quiet one. The kind that lives around the eyes more than the mouth. She typed back a heart and set the phone down. Inside her bedroom, on top of the dresser, next to a framed photograph of her grandmother, sat a velvet box. The sapphire ring. She got it back in the divorce settlement, hadn't worn it, didn't plan to, but she kept it. Not as a memory of Terrence, not as a trophy or a scar, as a reminder that she survived a man who was certain she wouldn't, that she stood in a room full of 200 people and told the truth without raising her voice, that she had walked out of her own life, the one she thought she wanted, the one she had built with someone who was tearing it down from the inside, and built a new one, with her own hands, on her own terms, in her own time. She picked up her coffee, watched the city begin its morning, a woman jogging with a dog on a red leash, rounding the corner at an easy pace. A father carrying his daughter on his shoulders across the parking lot, both of them laughing at something nobody else could hear. A school bus turning the far corner, yellow paint catching the early light like a promise that the day was just getting started. Joy set her cup down, opened her book. A breeze moved through the balcony and lifted the edge of a napkin. She pressed it flat with one finger without looking up. She wasn't waiting for anyone. She wasn't looking back. She was just here, present, breathing, free. She didn't win because she fought harder. She won because she knew when to stop fighting and start choosing herself. And sometimes, that's the most powerful thing a woman can do. If this story reminded you of someone who chose themselves when the world told them not to, share it with them. And if you want more stories about strength, truth, and what it really means to walk away with dignity, you know where to find us.